So, Spirit of Life, we give thanks for this time. We give thanks for this community. Ever evolving, ever becoming, ever renewing. So grateful for those who have served in the past. So grateful for those who have been here and have moved on. So grateful for those who have been here and have stayed and stayed and stayed. So grateful for the commitment to be a light on the prairie, to be a light on the prairie, and to join our small little band with other small little bands that are trying to make the world more just and more beautiful and more peaceful and more vibrant and alive and connected. We give you thanks, Spirit of Life, for all of that. We give you thanks for music that heals our soul. We give you thanks for spiritual exercises that get us moving about. And we give you thanks for these kids and for all this life. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, I'm going to now share a couple of readings, and then we're going to have our covenant sing-along. But first a reading. And the reading is in two parts. And they're both in your hymnal. And the first one comes from William Ellery Channing, who was the dean of the Unitarians during the early 1800s. And all those transcendentalists that we've been studying at Books Are Awesome came to that place as a result of Channing and so many others. But Channing really is one of the ancestors. And so he wrote this piece probably for a sermon or something. It's called The Free Mind. I call that mind free, which masters the senses and which recognizes its own reality and greatness. So already you see the transcendentalist kind of vibe going on, which passes life not in asking what it shall eat or drink, but in hungering, thirsting, and seeking after righteousness. I call that mind free, which jealously guards its intellectual rights and powers, which does not concern itself with a passive or hereditary faith, which opens itself to light whensoever it may come, which receives new truth as an angel from heaven. You get this transcendentalist feel here. I mean, this is very troublesome to orthodoxy. Which opens itself to light wherever it may come, which receives new truth as an angel from heaven. I call that mind free, which is not passively framed by outward circumstances and is not the creature of accidental impulse, which discovers everywhere the radiant signatures of the infinite Spirit. Let's just put that in our heart for a second. Which discovers everywhere the radiant signatures of the infinite Spirit, and in them finds help to its own spiritual enlargement. I call that mind free, which protects itself against the usurpations of society, and which does not cower to human opinion, which refuses to be the slave or tool of the many or the few, and guards its empire over itself as nobler than the empire of the world. I call that mind free, which resists the bondage of habit, which does not mechanically copy the past, nor live on its old virtues, but which listens for new and higher monitions of conscience, and rejoices to pour itself forth in flesh and higher exertions. I call that mind free, which sets no bound to its love, which wherever they are seen delights in virtue and sympathizes with suffering, which recognizes in all human beings the image of God and the rights of God's children, and offers itself up a willing sacrifice to the cause of humanity. I call that mind free, which has cast off all fear, but that of wrongdoing, and which no menace or peril can enthrall, which is calm in the midst of tumults, and possesses itself, though all else be lost. All right, so that's chanting. James Luther Adams came around 100 years later, the giant of mid-century 1900s Unitarian theology. And he was like, Channing got it mostly right. I can live with that. That's good. But so individualistic. It's so individualistic. It's not to be ignored, but he wanted to just broaden that to recognize the importance of community and the reality that we are made for connection, made for relationship. So he updates this and says, I call that church free. I call that church free which enters into covenant with the ultimate source of existence, that sustaining and transforming power not made with human hands. It binds together families and generations, protecting against the idolatry of any human claim to absolute truth or authority. This covenant is the charter and responsibility and joy of worship in the face of death as well as life. I call that church free, which brings individuals into a caring, trusting fellowship that protects and nourishes their integrity and spiritual freedom, that yearns to belong to the church universal. It is open to insight and conscience from every source. It bursts through rigid tradition, giving rise to new and living language, to new and broader fellowship. It's a pilgrim church, a servant church on an adventure of the Spirit. The goal is the prophethood and priesthood of all believers. The one for the liberty of prophesying, the other for the ministry of healing. It aims to find unity and diversity under the promptings of the Spirit, which blows where it will and makes all things new. That's covenantal language right there. That's covenant, and that is what we're going to be discussing a little bit today. But we're going to sing our covenant first.
Well, it's been a solid 2 years since anybody's heard this. I don't expect you to sing along with gusto. We could do it twice.
Yeah.
Once so you can hear it, and then maybe the second time you'll feel a little able. But, you know, we should really do it every week if we're going to get it figured out. Anyway.
Yeah, what you said.
We covenant to be a welcoming and loving community, offering each other fellowship, sanctuary, and a joyful spirit. We seek justice and peace in all our deeds and relationships, and we respect and honor both the individual and the collective search for sacred meaning and truth. We revere and celebrate the diversity of our earth and are guided by the Spirit that connects all life as we reach out to offer our best to ourselves, our community, and our world.
Let's do it twice. I
Yeah.
love it.
All right.
I love it.
Up here.
That's a lot of big words, man. That's a lot of big words.
Big words, yeah. Okay. We covenant to be a welcoming and loving community, offering each other fellowship, sanctuary, and a joyful spirit. We
Let's keep that up. I'm going to just talk for a minute about covenant. Recently in the Christian Century, a magazine out of Chicago that's been sort of the liberal Christian magazine for 100 years or so, they profiled a congregation in Seattle which is intentionally interfaith. So there are Muslims and Christians and Jews, and I think the head clergy is Muslim or Sikh or something like that. And they asked, what is one of the spiritual practices that is valuable to your community? Now, I suspect if somebody asked that of Prairie, we would say Sunday morning gathering and candles and occasional marches in the streets and circle suppers and so on. But this is what these said, and I just wanted to share it with you because it grabs hold of the idea of covenant without ever using those words. One that we are focused on very much is called 3 cups of tea. This is how we acknowledge differences and come to celebrate them. I love this. What are the 3 cups of tea? Listen, respect, connect. So first, listen. I love Rumi's definition. True listening is like putting your head on the person's chest and sinking into the answer. Isn't that great? True listening is like putting your head on the person's chest and sinking into the answer. Number 2 is respect. Maybe a person's behavior is unacceptable, but the person behind that behavior has a Christ nature, just as I do. I love that nature. There's a wonderful Indian mystic named Kabir, a Hindu and Muslim from the 15th century. He says, when you meet someone adversarial, protect yourself. Don't allow yourself to be abused. Take the right action. But as you take the right action, do not keep this person's essence or being out of your heart. It's all hard work. It's all hard work. Think about how embodied both of those 2 images are. First, putting your head down on somebody until you sink into the answer. And second, literally putting the person in front of you in your heart and holding it there. When I first came here in 1973, when did I come to Prairie? What was it? 6 months ago?
Yes.
When I first came here, I said the goal that I'm going to lift up over and over again is to be a chalice for one another. And someone very literally, literal-minded, who's like, I don't play in the field of metaphors, was like, we're going to burn each other? No. We're going to hold each other in the chalice. We're going to hold each other in the chalice. Right? That chalice is our symbol of what our faith represents. And holding one another in that chalice is holding one another in covenant. Is saying, I'm going to keep your Christ nature, your Allah nature, your Buddha nature, your human nature, your beautiful, quirky self in my heart, and it's not going anywhere no matter what happens. And the last one is connect, and I love this. Share stories. This is why, what are they called? Circle suppers? Mm-hmm. This is why circle suppers are so important. You don't have to get into a big discussion about Muhammad being the last prophet, or Jesus being the only way to God, or who the chosen people are. You just connect on a human level. Love that. So that's what this interfaith person said about all of that. But this image, I can't get it out of my head. Rumi, sink, what does he say? Put your head on their chest and sink into the answer. I saw this firsthand on Friday morning. I was telling Carol about this. I did a memorial service for a family whose 2-year-old who had medically complex issues from the first day. I did the funeral for that 2-year-old. And you're all of the age, except Evan, to know this kid had hair like Art Garfunkel in the 70s, you know? His hair was like this, and he had this big smile, his oxygen, but he had this big smile. And that community that rallied around that family, they had different faith ideas, they had different ideas about what was going to happen to that kid, but the parents were atheists, which is why they called me. And that whole hour was putting all of our heads on each other's chest and sinking into an answer that is not answerable. Sinking into a question without an answer. I love that image. If you take no other image home with you today, take that image with you. I want to tell you just a little bit about this UU history. And I what time is it, Paul?
It is
11:20. Well, we'll come back to this for sure. But the Puritans of our background founded this idea of covenant in the American tradition. So covenant goes back to the Hebrew Bible, and it's a sacred agreement. It's a sacred agreement about how to be in relationship with one another. It's an acceptance, and it's voluntary. The most important thing about it is that it's voluntary. My friend Jake Morrill is a minister in Tennessee, grew up UU, and is head of the Christian Fellowship. And he said that in their UU service the other day, that this family in the middle of his sermon just got up and walked out. And he said, I have no idea what that family was thinking in that moment. I don't know if there was an emergency. I don't know if I said something that was off-putting to them. But we blessed them on the way out because everybody who remained voluntarily. It was a voluntary association, and this is the heart of covenant. It's not imposed from outside. There's no external authority. It is an internal agreement among all of us, and when it doesn't work anymore, we change it. But I want to tell you about this early Puritan covenant. 1648, the Cambridge Platform. I'm not going to bore you with that. But Alice Blair Wesley, who was a Maryland minister in our tradition for many years, has updated this Puritan covenant to have these words. We pledge to walk together in the ways of truth and affection as best we know them now, or may learn them in days to come, that we and our children might be fulfilled, and that we might speak to the world in words and action of peace and goodwill. That's the Puritan heritage. They used language that was different than that. But that's the idea. And that's how we come to covenants like this, and covenants in many different ways of speaking, but about the same thing. But I want to tell you about this group in Dedham who came up with this, Dedham, Mass, who came up with this. This is 1648. This is around that time. The group of Puritans in Dedham scheduled meetings every Thursday night for a year to develop their covenant. How they were going to be, there was no YouTube, so they weren't missing out on that much, you know. But they decided, how are we going to be together in worship and otherwise? They had some rules for those meetings. The first was that they would decide before leaving each meeting what question to discuss next week so that everybody could ponder it in their hearts. And then they would only talk about that question. They were supposed to speak their own understandings or doubts. They weren't They were not invited to argue or nitpick. They spoke from their hearts. In addition, like that interfaith group in Seattle, they did not talk about dogma or creed. They talked about how they're going to relate to each other and the wider world. They were living into covenant even as they created it. And so are we. So are we. We're not Puritans in 1648. Thank the goddess. But we are Unitarian Universalists who have inherited that tradition. And we form our covenants as we live into them. To be a welcoming and loving community, offering each other fellowship, sanctuary, and a joyful spirit, seeking justice, seeking peace in all of our deeds and relationships. We respect the individual and the community. As each of us, individually and together, seek out our meaning and truth. Metaphors be with you. Metaphors be with you as you seek your truth. See, that's a little play on Star Wars. May the force be with you. Metaphors be with you. Whatever metaphor you use, we're here to support you as long as we're walking in peace and justice. A covenant is a mutual sacred promise between individuals or groups to stay in relationship, care about each other, and work together in good faith. And if someone leaves, to bless them. And if someone comes in, to share with them this covenant and how we do this. Seekers, finders, all of us. There's so much more to say about unlocking the power of covenant. We will undoubtedly return to this topic. But it is the very heart of Unitarian Universalism. And the more that we get clear about how we want to be together and why we want to be together, the more powerful we'll become. Covenants work in small churches, in huge churches, and medium-sized churches. And covenants are our very, very, very best sort of gift to the religious world. And as we wrestle with what it means to grow into this living tradition, we will create our covenant as we're living into it, and we'll live into our covenant as we're creating it. The Puritans got a few things wrong about covenant. It was for those bands, but once you were outside the covenant, bad things happened. There was a blind spot. So Native Americans, witches, all kinds of people, once they were outside the covenant. And now, James Luther Adams and others reminded us that the covenant is a covenant of being that belongs to all people and all critters in all times and all places. Okay, what happens next?
Well, next, I think,
Eric's going to do a song.
oh, good. Oh, okay.
Love it. That's my sermon on covenant for the time being. There will be more.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see. Just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. If the sky that we look upon should tumble and fall, or the mountain should crumble to the sea, I won't cry, I won't cry. No, I won't shed a tear. Just as long as you stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand now. Stand by me. Stand by me. Oh, darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand now. Stand by me. Stand by me. Won't you stand by me? Whenever you're in trouble, stand by me.